Welcome to the Self-Intelligence Podcast, where I have radically honest and heart-opening conversations with amazing people who are willing to share their stories and information that can have a profound impact on your life. Have you ever wondered what a dark night of the soul is? Or maybe you're experiencing one right now. If you're feeling lost, passionless, directionless, hopeless, confused, overwhelmed, cynical, and possibly suicidal, you may be experiencing a dark night of the soul. In this podcast session, I speak with Jiro, who has been spiraling in a dark night for over a year, and only recently he has come through the other side. In this session, we discuss what triggered this episode, the grueling details of what he experienced, and how he pulled through to the other side to return to us all with renewed inspiration, powerful teachings, and amazing services that support growth and healing for humanity. Thank you, Jiro, for your vulnerability and bravery to expose your inner journey that will inspire hope and courage in those who experience this age-old journey that Jiro so eloquently coined fear and bamboozlement in Byron Bay. Jiro, thank you for coming on the Self-Intelligence Podcast. This is the radical, honest conversation segment where we just unpack a journey and just look at how essentially we've navigated through something. Jiro, my friend here, we've known each other for quite some time now, has been doing massive work with men, with CEOs of essentially tech companies and running medicine journeys. And just recently, Jiro has come out of what we would term, for lack of a better word, a dark night of the soul, and wrote an article recently called Fear and Bamboozlement in Byron Bay. Have I got that correct?
Yeah.
And so I found this such a rare opportunity to talk to someone who's so articulate and self-aware like Jiro, just to navigate through that journey. So why don't you take us a little bit through where you've come from, and you can elaborate on any of the points I just made about what kind of work that you've been doing in the world. And there's been relationship stuff, and I can relate to that too in the last couple of years, just so those who are listening get a bit of a sense of what was and what was taken away.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks for opening this up, Chris. So yeah, I'll sort of start at the beginning of that kind of COVID chapter, because it felt like, I don't know if you guys remember, I think it was like January or February. I don't even know what year, 2020 or...
Yeah, 2020.
Yeah, where it was like we first got wind of this strange thing that was going on. And I remember, well, first of all, one thing that happened for me right then was that when global travel stopped, I kind of lost I had all my clients overseas. I was working with a bunch of tech CEOs and business founders, mostly in the US, and all of a sudden it just like ended when travel ended, and it was like the world was going through a little disruption. It was weird. It felt kind of like amazing and expansive in the early stages of it. And basically I had an experience where, yeah, there was this huge change in terms of my calling. I just felt the call to stop all that stuff, or the universe kind of stopped all that stuff. And I opened up to start a men's work container or a mentoring journey for men. That was the first big chapter. That went on for 3 years. In the midst of all of this, I was at the time married. We'd just bought 12 acres of land. And not long after all that kicked off, I just felt this strong calling to leave that, to leave the marriage, to leave community, to begin a new chapter.
And so that's massive, right? Let's just stop there for a second and put that in perspective. So, because buying a property is huge, and for everybody in life, it's generally a pretty significant step, right? And it was your first property too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like the dream. You know, we, my partner at the time, we bought acreage, beautiful acreage, and the idea was to grow humans and vegetables and magical plants, and just have that real, that community dream that so many of us have of living close to the earth. It was amazing. It was beautiful, but there was something that wasn't in alignment. I remember talking to you about this chapter. It was like everything on the outside was perfect, but there was something within that didn't feel in alignment. And I was my partner at the time. We were struggling to create harmony and coherence, and we were both at different stages of our spiritual journey. And without going too much into the dynamics of that relationship, we both gave it a real. We both tried our hardest to make it work over a period of many years. And then it came to November, and it was just time to call it. And I made that call, and I left the home and went on. It was the beginning of a really intense grief journey. I lived in a van. I went driving around, and I basically just, spent a lot of time by myself, just reflecting on that relationship and reflecting on all the dreams that we had together, and reflecting on just my part in that relationship dynamic, and just spent a lot of time grieving and feeling the pain of it all, and singing songs and wailing and just going through the pain and turmoil of it all. But not long after that, 6 months, it was a 6-month intense grieving process, and then I fell in love again, and began a new journey. And then not long after that, we decided to call in or open the doors for a baby. And not long after that, we were pregnant. And not long after that, we'd had the baby, and that was the beginning of what I'll call like when Anna was pregnant. It was a very challenging pregnancy. She had intense morning sickness. I remember potentially one of the lowest or scariest or most traumatizing chapters of my life was when Anna was in the throes of morning sickness. It was the first 3 months of her pregnancy. This was like December 2021, I guess. It was a time where everyone in Australia was getting COVID, and we got the virus when she was like super sick already. It was just raining the whole time. We were living in this moldy shack at the time, and it was just like literally like hell. And I remember living in this place just feeling like, oh my God, this is so intense. This is like the cocoon. I could feel like we were entering into the darkness. And Anna had 6 months more of pregnancy, but that was the beginning of me going into what I call this dark night of the soul. And it really was a descent that was catalyzed then.
I like to just bring up, in terms of this word alignment, came to me when I was considering the dark night of the soul. What you mentioned there and what I've experienced for myself is, one, creating a life, like my life. I've got this life that I want to live, right? And it's got all its dreams and visions and ideas and everything else. And then there's this sense of alignment, isn't there? There's this sense of rightness inside that may have nothing to do with what those visions are, whether you've bought a property or have a relationship that's been going on for 10 years or longer, or whatever the case is. No matter how many conversations you may have had and stewed over and planned and did all of this alignment inside just goes, no, that's not it. Oh, we're going to take all that away. And it's like, this alignment, this sense, I call it a sense of rightness. It's like, yeah, that feels right, or it doesn't, something like that. It is probably a way to point to it. But you mentioned there in the relationship, something outside of how good on paper it all looked, it just wasn't in alignment. And then that thrust you into a whole completely different journey in a really short space of time. Because the mind doesn't really believe that that's possible. Like, in 6 months' time, I'm going to find a new love of my life, and then have a child only so many, months or after that. That's just not even possible in the mind. And yet that's what happens.
It was bonkers, to think that in 2 years, or it was even less than 2 years, I could go from being in a really challenging situation in one relationship and talking about our dreams together, and are we going to have children together, and where are we going? And then 2 years later, there's a completely different relating dynamic with a completely different human being, and there's actually a baby there. It's just bonkers how quickly things can change. And that's why I use the word bamboozlement in that little article or blog post. It's an underused word, I reckon. It was utterly bamboozling. There were things going on that there's no rhyme or reason. Just strange things happening. It was a weird chapter, that like it was a really bizarre, weird chapter. And I've part of my work over the last few years has been in rites of passage, like leading or sort of understanding, studying, first of all, like initiation, rites of passage, ritual pathways for evolution and maturation. And, I've spoken a pretty good game with people and led some pretty amazing journeys for people, vision quests and medicine journeys, where human beings have had the opportunity to kind of like initiate themselves into a greater level of depth and maturity and truth. And so I could speak to rites of passage. I understand the journey. I understand the sort of arc of transformation. I understand that there's a descent process. There's a going down. There's a vertical downward journey into the mush. I understand all the metaphors about caterpillars going into the cocoon and disintegrating before they become butterflies. I get it. But my God, to experience it's so easy to talk about ego death and letting go of our identities, and these are just words that just like roll off the tongue. But the actual process of it is unbelievably, or for me, was unbelievably challenging, painful, terrifying, bamboozling. It was full fear town. Like I got to see all of my fears really up close, like just from all these different angles. And I felt like I was in the mortar and pestle, just getting pulverized, just getting smashed. And like everything that had form was just getting turned into powder. Every belief system, every concept, every practice, every idea was just up for review. And it was put into this giant cosmic mortar and pestle and just like ground down into mush until I didn't even know who I was or what I stood for or why I'm here or what I care about or what I like and what I don't like. And all of these things just kind of like, it went like Control Alt Delete, like the computer just rebooted. It was fucking terrifying for a long time.
What you're saying seems essentially unbearable, right? It's like, if I'm to listen to that part of me that knows what's right, and it's got nothing to do with right and wrong from a conditional belief sense, but just knows rightness, the next feeling is I won't be able to bear that. I won't be able to bear the journey of exactly, Jiro, what you're saying. It's like there's intuitive understanding. It's like, I'm not sure if I'll survive it. And it's like, yeah, that's the point. But it's like, but that would be really scary. Like not just like conceptually and like spiritual fluff version that you, like you said, we can all speak of and talk about and whatever the case is, but actually to truly live through the pain of realizing I don't actually know who I am in the way that I thought I did. And I don't even know if I'll survive this. Or yeah, of course, fear is going to be major in that, isn't it? Your survival's at stake.
Yeah, lots of fear, lots of confusion as well. Just lots of like, which way is up? Like being tossed around in the ocean by big waves and you're just getting pinned down. Yeah, lots of fear in there for sure.
This alignment process is a letting go process. It seems, you had to let go of a lot of things. You had to let go of businesses that you developed over years, like men's groups and even with the CEOs and stuff like that. Like the conversations we had over the years was just like, that doesn't align anymore. Like the energy's not there. I'd be being false, essentially, trying to push energy down to these places. And I'm speaking to this because so many people listening will resonate with that I'm doing something that's not being driven naturally. It's been forced because I don't know what's on the other. I don't know what else I'd be doing. I don't know what would be happening. And I've invested so much in this path it would be crazy to let it go. It almost seems. But you have been, from what I've witnessed, very willing to let go of these major pieces of Jiro's life in order to kind of plunge into these dark places in a sense.
Yeah, I think that, when I was 15 years old, I left the religious cult that I was born into. And I think that, my mum's a Jehovah's Witness and she's pretty fanatical and hardcore. And I was brought up knocking on doors and going to church 3 times a week and just doing relentless amounts of Bible study. And yeah, I was just like fully brainwashed until I decided that I didn't want to be. So that set the template for a type of courage or freedom seeking. I kind of feel like why I've incarnated or why I'm here right now is to learn about ultimate freedom. I think that's the same for everybody. But I think that I've been given some absolutely wonderful opportunities to learn about freedom that exists beyond belief by experiencing some really strong belief systems and some really like intense environments where beliefs and ideas are very incepted in people. And so I spent years in this religion before I got out, and then I plunged into the corporate world when I was 24 years old because I actually wanted to experience like this belief system of success and wealth and like being a big shot and making my dad proud and just that notion of success that had been incepted into me by friends and family and culture and movies and so forth. I wanted to experience it. And so I went headlong into the corporate world in the second half of my 20s and I made shitloads of money and my dad was super proud and he loved telling his mates about what a success that his son was and yeah, I climbed the corporate ladder and I blah, 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 blah. But when I got out of that, it was like leaving the religious cult. It was just another cult. And I could see quite clearly the cults and belief systems have fears underlying them. They're like the belief in something is supposed to create it's like you can believe in something. If you can believe in that so strongly, it's like you don't have to face the fear of something else. All right. It's like if you really in the corporate world, it's like if you really buy into this belief that the more money you have, the more successful you'll be, and the more happy you'll be, and the more free you'll be, and the better your life will be. Well, then that really means that you can not look at the truth, which is that it's got nothing to do with any of that stuff, right? It's got absolutely nothing to do with any of that stuff. So on the outer level, like leaving things and changing things, whether it's coming out of religions, coming out of the corporate world, coming out of a marriage that isn't working, leaving a country to go to another country, starting a new career, leaving this income stream, starting this income stream, that level of stuff is kind of like easy for me in a sense.
Well, but let's be clear, like that's not easy. That's not easy for a lot of people. And that's why they're looking to people like yourself who have that innate ability. And I have a similar story with the Christian. Well, I was brought up in a fundamentalist Christian church, and I feel so blessed that I came out of that because in the very same way that you described, it's like I can see it's all a cult now. Every belief system is a cult because it's not real. It's a belief. A belief changes. It's not fundamentally real. So it's promising something that's not ultimately true. But until you've experienced that, you just think religions are cults, or these fanatical beliefs around God are cults. But you've realized the idea of success is a cult. The whole idea of relationship is a cult set up in beliefs, and you realize these things as well. You've navigated that in such a way that you've been a powerful supporting influence in other people's lives. And then it was like, all right, Jiro, it's your turn, bro. It's your turn, buddy. It's your turn to be challenged to different places. So what catalyzed that for you that was different to what you've been experiencing? What plunged you into this new level of darkness that's not something you've experienced so far?
I'm still bamboozled, so I can't really speak in concrete terms about that. But potentially having a baby in the womb and like looking ahead at fatherhood. And, I think that had a catalyzing factor in it all as well. I also, I'll flesh that out. It kind of felt like the little one in the womb was kind of cheering me and Anna on, but also saying like, get your shit together. Like I'm coming in hot, right? And you guys are calling me in. I'm coming in hot, and we're going to be a family, and this is what's going on, and you're going to be a steward of life. You're going to be a parent. There was some sort of mystical domino effect from that just like created this shift inside me where I started to really go on a deep inner journey. It was like a coming apart. I still struggle to find words for it because here I was in a beautiful relationship. We had consciously chosen to have a baby, and there was a baby coming, and yet here I was experiencing a lot of magic and beauty and love and awe, and yet at the same time completely getting dismantled and kind of feeling this disintegration and this kind of like decaying, or this kind of thing happening deep inside that I can't even find words to. But there was a death process happening at the same time as this baby was growing inside the womb. This is rites of passage territory. This is initiation territory. This is like I was going into, I'd crossed the threshold, we would say, in if anybody's studied like Joseph Campbell's work, he talks about how a rite of passage has three kind of big chapters. And the first one is separation from the normal or ordinary world. So it's the hero leaving home. And then you have the threshold experience. And this is the hero or the heroine meeting the dragon or facing a nemesis, right? And then the third part is the return home, where the hero or the heroine returns home with the lessons that they've learned. And so I was in a really, really powerfully non-ordinary state of consciousness for an extended period of time, like a liminal state. And I want to speak about how my inner reality and the outer reality was kind of like dancing together, because it was weird when we had that COVID time and there were mandates and I couldn't get in my car and go and drive and see you without getting stopped by the cops, and they're like, show your papers. And it was just like that bizarre time where our freedoms were getting sort of challenged and families were getting split down the middle, and we were like, what the hell's going on, and what's true and what's not true? And there was this collective sense of like fear and uncertainty and I think that a lot of people were asking new questions at that time. People were facing fears and experiencing new types of emotions that they hadn't necessarily experienced, and my inner reality and my outer reality were kind of dancing together. I'll give you an example. When they put in these mandates where they said you couldn't drive across the border, I had a nightmare that same night that I heard that news. And in my dreams, I dreamt about being in a concentration camp where, people were like forcing needles into me and all that sort of shit. There was some fears deep in my psyche that the external environment was like dragging up to the surface for me to have a look at, So that's what I mean about inner reality and outer reality kind of like playing together.
We're talking a lot about freedom. I'm hearing this word coming up a bit as we're chatting. There's a thing there, even if it's COVID, it's like our freedoms were shifting in that. And this baby coming along, maybe an inquiry around what perceptions around my sense of identity were there that said, this is what freedom is, this is what I know freedom is. And then the baby comes along and goes, well, I'm going to challenge all those ideas. I'm going to challenge your ideas of what freedom is, that you've defined yourself by as who you are as Jiro and his whole outlook. And it's like, that's all going to have to reorientate. That may be part of it. I'm not saying it is. It'd be probably a worthwhile reflection to see in terms of what was let go of, because my understanding of the whole journey of life is this letting go process, letting go of everything that I've attached to my sense of self. So if I've given myself an idea that this is what freedom means and this is how it happens and this is how it happens for me, then life will challenge that and go, well, yeah, you might get a little moment with that where it seems like you've got the thing that you thought you had, and then growth and alignment will utterly contradict that or slap it back in your face or whatever. And then it's like, okay, so who are you now? Who are you now? And it's like, I don't know. That's the problem. Right?
Totally, man. Yeah, I mean, I had carved out a life where, yeah, and I was very attached to notions of freedom. You know, I think that most parents can resonate with part of the journey of parenthood. You go through this chapter where you realize that on some dimension, you know, whether it's the amount of time that you've got to go surfing, or whether it's the amount of mental bandwidth you've got to study something or explore something, like you just have to, there's a reckoning. You have to face up to the reality that this child it's a huge thing that's happening, and you're going to have to do more than you were doing before in terms of domestic stuff, and you're going to be carrying more burden in terms of financial stress, and you're going to have less time and you're going to have less sleep to do it with, and it's a squeeze, you know, and it put me and Anna into this really gnarly experience of like facing that. And yeah, of course, it's letting go of these previous ideas of freedom that we had. Freedom to jump on a plane, freedom to just go to Bali, freedom to jump in the van and just head out to a forest, you know, all sorts of these relative freedoms. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of these had to be faced. Yeah, there's definitely an aspect of that being part of the pain, you know, for sure. It's that, and it's more, you know. When I reflect on it, what actually is a dark night of the soul? What is an awakening experience?
Let's look at that. Just like, what to you is at this point in time a dark night of the soul? Because that's essentially the conversation we're having. For anyone who feels like they're in that space, they're going to tune into this podcast and sort of be able to relate, you know, to the challenge. And I feel like that's really important, because that ability to connect in and resonate with this archetypal journey that we all encounter at different times in our life is really helpful, to be able to have people like yourself who can articulate that to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how well I can articulate it. As I say, I'm still in Bamboozle Town.
Yeah, well, so we're pretty fresh, right? We're pretty fresh. It's like I met you at the gate as you came to the return, and with a microphone, and went, Jiro, tell us all about this. You're like, wait, bro, wait. I'm still processing, man.
I'm still processing, bro. Yeah, I mean, like I'll speak to some of the experiences that I went through, and maybe some nuggets will come up through that. I had a chapter where I just had this chapter of life where I was like resentful and bitter and critical and judgmental of everything and everyone. And that's not my innate nature, and that's not the way that people would have described me. But here I was going through this downward spiral, feeling depressed and anxious, and I just went super dark and bitter, and I kind of like saw how people get, you know, bitter and twisted for their whole lives. You know, I saw that process. It was interesting just to see, what is this in me? Like where is this coming from, and where has it been hiding? And and I think that's the beauty of it, is that I can say, oh, that was in me and it was hiding.
You know, this is really powerful what you're saying, Jiro, because one of the things that I hear coming out of a lot of people's mouths, particularly in triggering situations and with relationships and all sorts of things, is they say, I would never do that to someone else. I would never respond like that. I'd never react like that. I would never feel like that. I that's not who I am. And it's so certain, you see, right? And it's like, how much do these moments go, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Like, I had no idea what was possible inside me, how I could react, respond, and be. It's a humbling thing, right?
Yeah, what I saw in me, it was like I saw so much blame energy Like just came rushing to the surface. Like I can be a finger pointing, judgmental, childish, blame anybody if it stops me from taking self-responsibility type of person, you know? And that was in me. And it came up with like this ferocity that just couldn't be ignored, you know? Like I would feel shit or I'd feel triggered and I'd instantly like blame Anna. Like I could watch my ego go, like find the angle at which it could manipulate reality to make it someone else's fault. It was staggering to watch. And unfortunately, because I had, you know, Anna reflecting back at me and also my own capacity and my curiosity to watch my ego do its thing, I was able to like watch this sort of stuff come up with a lot of curiosity and awareness. But it was staggering how much stuff was in there. It's like so much judgment, so much resentment. And then halfway through this dark night of the soul, I made the questionable decision to go on an ayahuasca journey, well, 3 ayahuasca journeys. And, you know, I've worked a lot with that plant over the last 10 years. And in a nutshell, I had 3 of the most harrowing, horrendously terrifying nights of my life, but wonderful in the sense that I got to see again how much stuff is in my closet, how much stuff was in my basement, really how much fear I had. So much fear, you know, fear of, I'll spell it out, fear of annihilation, fear of endless pain and suffering, fear of totalitarian governments taking our so-called freedom away, fear of being trapped, you know, fear of my loved ones experiencing suffering, fear of poverty, whatever it was, just so many fears. And I had some experiences where like I could just feel the dense, dark energy of these fears just in my being, in my body or in my mind. And, you know, it was really, really painful to have these experiences. I used the word harrowing, very like visceral and raw and overwhelming, but I think so valuable. And I'm so happy that I had those experiences because there was no denying or running away from the fact that they were there. And I feel like my journey through the dark night of the soul has been a journey of facing fears head on.
I love that because in most ordinary moments in life, in anybody's life, there's barely ever a recognition that, and I call it psychological fear, right? Fear that's made in the mind, fear of the future, past projections, all of this sort of stuff. Rarely in anyone's life is there a true recognition of that fear, and yet it's driving everything. If I use the word shadow work, I'm talking about discovering fear that's driving behavior, driving action, making decisions. It's in the driver's seat and yet can cleverly look like it's being responsible and loving even, and all these different things that create a lot of confusion when the result of those actions and way of life create such toxicity, or the things that we're seeing in the world right now, right? A lot of confusion and overwhelm and all of these things. There's so many subjects where it's like, why is it manifesting like this? Why is the outer result this? And it's like, because fear's behind it. And it's like, but no, I'm not afraid. You know, Jiro maybe 2 years ago would be like, oh, I'm not afraid of a thing. I mean, I'm just in the flow of life and all of this. And then it's like, well, deep beyond that, give you the right stimulus, give you the right circumstances. There is fear there that is unknown to you at this point. And it takes humbleness to say, I don't know myself fully. I don't know what might come out of me in this environment or that environment. I don't know what I'm capable of. Maybe I'm a Hitler in the making and I have no idea about this. You see, I'm a depressed person or whatever the case, or I'm suicidal. How the hell did suicidal thoughts all of a sudden come out of nowhere, which are very predictable? And I could only imagine those thoughts may have occurred to you at certain times where they may not be taken seriously, but the thought will arise. It's like, oh, here's that thought, right? I just prefer not to be here if it's going to be like this or whatever the case. The thing that you mentioned is that you were curious or you were aware of this happening. That part is really important because If you're not aware that it's happening, then that process becomes your identified state. So now I, Jiro, am bitter, twisted. I am the victim. Now your victim state is who you are and all these things, right? But fortunately, you've done enough. The work that you've been doing prior to this was actually sincere enough to be supportive to you, right? In these stages. Tell us a little bit about how your pre-work, your medicine journeys, or whatever it is that you've supported others with had helped you through this time. If it did, or what could you say about that?
Yeah, I'm so thankful for having a bedrock of awareness or having a familiarity with that, sitting on that throne of witness consciousness, of just being able to watch it all. Because my experience of whatever you want to call it, it was like an experience, a super immersive experience of ego consciousness. It was like, rather than a journey of awakening, I actually went through the opposite. It was like I had to go through hyper ego identification and intense mind attacks. So it was almost like everything just turned up, the intensity of it all. And I, whether it was the judgment or whether it was the criticism, whether it was the resentment, whether it was the blame stories, whether it was the victim narratives, the inability to let go of regret, like I had to like marinate in it. And it was very immersive. It was very convincing. It was very like, I could see how people that hadn't done certain type of work would just take that for reality, would just take that for truth, But fortunately, because for the work that I'd done, there was always, even in the depths of the suffering, there was always this kind of like this, how do I describe it? It was weird because it was like full on dark and I was getting tossed around and I was in fear, but there was a little bit of humor there. There was there was a little bit of an upturned corner of my mouth. There was a little bit of a cheeky glint in my eye, because there was a deeper part of me, like my true self understood what was going on.
If you would like to discover who you really are beyond the voice in your head and emotional states that cause relationship drama, stress, health issues, procrastination, sabotage, addictions, essentially all the drama and personal problems you can think of, come and join me for the Wake Up Experience, which is the first step in freeing yourself from the inside out. See the link in the description for more details.
It was like when you let the dogs out and you're like, they've been in the house and you're like, they've got to go have a run around. So you open the door and the dogs just go run around and they chase their tail and they run around and they expend all this energy. Or if you've got a baby that's a bit grizzly, we're practicing this thing where we're like, all right, we're going to let the baby release the emotions. We're going to let the baby cry. We're going to let the baby vent and we're going to hold it with love. And it was almost like this part of myself just needed to just like lash out and vent and like almost like exhaust itself into nothing. And so that I could have the experience of witnessing that from this other place, And it was a really, really powerful experience of witnessing all these fears arising. And yeah, it was the practice of self-inquiry. It was the practice of anchoring into my heart. It was certain questions. Like one of your questions that I learned from you was who is the one suffering? And it was like a mantra that played out. Another practice that I would have was to explore whether, when I was in the throes of some sort of fear story, was to ask myself, can I find belonging in this moment? Can I feel the safety of this moment? Can I feel like, can I tune into a perfection or a wholeness in this moment, even whilst these stories are playing out? And so I was constantly using these tools and these practices to come back to my heart. Yeah, the other point was just around like just patience. I kind of like, when you're a surfer and you go out surfing in large waves, you often get smashed by a wave and pinned to the bottom. But you know that it's a temporary experience. If you can hold your breath long enough, you're going to pop out the other side. It's like there's always a cycle. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end to it. I remember hearing these wise people in my life say, Jiro, you're right in it. And it's not going to always be this way. And you're moving through it and you're going to come out, the other side. And at the time, my ego was like, bullshit, this is the end. This is forever. This is like, I'm done. Like there's like, I have no inspiration. I am just a blob of fear and anxiety. And that is it right now. But there was also a wiser part within that was just like watching the whole thing with amusement, and lo and behold, a new day dawned and is still dawning, and life feels very different right now.
There's a few terms there like the witness and ego. I actually have on this podcast a 10-minute just quick understanding of ego because this term is thrown around a lot and used and points to very different things for a lot of people. So if that term is not completely clear to you, have a look at that because it's really important. In simple terms, from the way that I use the word, and you can verify this as well, Jiro, is anything that you've identified is you that's not you. We don't even realize how much we have identified as ourselves or as reality that isn't actually true. And reality has this way of going, my job is to ensure you discover it's not real the way you thought or believed, which is the benefit you had in Christianity. There was an identity there. I am a Christian. This is who I am. And it's like, well, now it's gone and you're still here. You still remain even though the belief system is gone. So you mustn't be a belief or you mustn't be those things. You must be this something that's behind all of that, which is then what we call a witnessing state. There's a witnessing presence watching all of this taking place that is not in the turmoil or excitement or any part of it, actually. It's just purely witnessing and allowing of everything that you mentioned so that it can pass and go, not become a diagnosis, which it could become. It could be Jiro's psychotic now. We need to medicate him or whatever the case is, because you can think those things are happening. Is there something fundamentally now wrong with me? Is this what's happening? Those thoughts can certainly take place as well for a lot of people. So wherever there's confusion around that, reach out for more clarity, those who are listening, because these are big terms that require simplicity to really engage in your life. And certainly with self-intelligence, it's a masterful practice of having a habit of witnessing through inquiry when you're triggered, right? So for example, in the case that the blame came up, then there would be the habitual process of a line of questioning that would bring you back to the witnessing state rather than the identified state. So that's a habit process. So that becomes a normal thing. So now you've used whatever practices you've used, and that's another good thing to know for everybody who tunes in with this, is that there's different ways to the same place. If you would like to download a free beginner self-recognition guided meditation audio to start your journey of healing and freeing yourself from the inside out, see the link in the description or go to selfintelligence.com. Self-intelligence offers certain ways. I absolutely love plant medicine as a way to awaken the realization of awareness. And I know that you resonate really deeply with that. And that may be a good segue to what has now birthed out the other side of this dark night that you're now initiated to deliver to the world in a whole new way, in a more purified way, in a deeper, broader, more mature, perhaps wiser way than you were before.
Yeah, one of the ways that I'm perceiving a dark night of the soul is that it's a potent and rich opportunity to integrate all the lessons and journeys that you've been on in your life. A lot of people go on these powerful, whether it's plant medicine or maybe they do a 3-day water fast or a vision quest, or they do Vipassana or whatever it might be, and they go through a relatively intense experience. And it's like, I kind of think that not a lot of integration often happens because we get pulled into our lives and our families and our jobs and our routines and our roles and all that sort of thing. So I'm like coming out of the back of this 2-year experience where I feel like I've actually integrated a lot of the amazing journeys that I've been on. And what's birthing for me right now is what I'm calling Taksu Tea House. It's Taksu is a Balinese word. It means divine inspiration or spiritual power. And a tea house is a tea house. It's a place you go for restoration and reinvigoration. And, coming out of this journey that I've been speaking about with Chris, I've dropped a lot of stuff, like this need to work with CEOs and business founders, which was kind of like dominating my offerings for a while, is kind of like gone. And I'm here just to show up to create and nourish and support community for people who are walking a spiritual path, a path of awakening, a path of remembering the truth of who we really are. So Taksu Tea House, which is launching in about 3 weeks, it's a community for anybody who is walking this path. It doesn't matter your job title, it doesn't matter your gender, it doesn't matter your age or how experienced you are. It's a place, it's an online community, it's a place where people gather to be nourished by wisdom, by conversations, by tools and practices, by coming together to share the truth of our own experience, a place to share creative, artistic, poetic expression, a place to gather like tribe. And I know that having been through my own challenging chapters in my life, there can be a sense of loneliness and isolation when we walk this path. Often we're like, does anybody get it? And you're going through the gnarliest journey of your life, and the people around you are still kind of talking about the footy or like what was on TV last night, and you're like yearning for like the deeper, more nourishing conversation. And I'm fortunate to be able to have that and pick up the phone and call you, Chris, or call Tess, or call whoever, call one of our friends, and we can just go there and like, this is what's happening for me and this is what's coming up. And that space can be held where there's a curiosity about it. And I feel that's been the most healing, the most evolutionary thing in my life has been having that. And a lot of people don't have that. So I want to create something where people actually do have that. And there's another layer of support, and the insights and the epiphanies that people have maybe while they're on plant medicine, they can be nourished, and they can be like we can blow on the embers and bring heat and bring life to these new visions. And yeah, this is a community that I see in service to the awakening that's happening. It's a place of refuge where people on this journey of transformation can come and be nourished and walk their path with greater power and integrity.
Yeah, that's so key, mate. Community right now is massive. I've got a community as well, and people are going to resonate to different communities at different times because they have different flavors to them. They have a different perhaps purpose or way that they're held that is nourishing at different times. And there's so much support for this transition that's taking place. There's so much support for that alignment that deep inside is there, that it won't feel right to live your last breath not following that. It's such a celebration when it comes into community, isn't there? It's like, this is really living now in friendship, in communion with others, right? Common union, common communication. Like you said, the conversation still is for so many surrounded with things that are just profoundly unfulfilling now for a lot of people. And it's like, where is this conversation happening that's not in fluff town, where it's not like someone's the guru who has all, who's enlightened, but actually a place of true sharing. And that's what we have. If I want to share something, Jiro's not going to there going, I'm going to fix Chris and make him, I'm going to be the guy who feels like I'm getting all the credit for the good work I'm doing as a friend. It's like, share, brother, just share it and share it in such a place of true understanding, which actually lands in your silence, and the right words or the right questions come that feel like I've actually been truly heard.
That's it. It's the medicine of being witnessed and being heard. I feel like it's powerful medicine. And yeah, that's why I love circle work so much, like gathering in circle, in council, or whatever you want to call it, coming spaces where we can actually be witnessed. I actually think it's the most potent form of integration work. There's a lot of work there's a lot of talk out there about psychedelic integration or plant medicine integration. And I've been pondering, like, what actually is it? You know, like there's all the ceremonies that I go on, the space holders always, the good ones anyway, place a large emphasis on trying to help people integrate their experiences. But to be honest, for me, the most powerful way to integrate an experience is to be witnessed and to be in a space where what I share and what's coming through in the days and weeks and months and maybe even the years afterwards are met from that place where they land in that silence. And that's where the healing happens. That's where the acceptance happens. That's where we can move on from that place of like, this is it. This is real, right? So, yeah, I think we're riffing and creating the same things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my sessions are literally called integration sessions.
Yeah, right.
Like the whole community comes together each week in an integration session. And I didn't come up with that term from really even being conscious that that's how important it was. It was like the term just naturally arose in the process. And then it so happened that integration was then connected to community. This naturally happened as well. And it's just like, oh, wow, this is so much bigger than my mind trying to work something out. There's something very energetically simple and clear about what's happening with this.
I think it's important because, first of all, like there's a new kind of role out there. There's people who are getting trained to be like psychedelic integration coaches. And it's like wow, this is even a thing. And I think it's interesting. Like, I think that when we're living in kind of like, there's an intensity and I feel like more and more people are seeking out intense experiences, like an ayahuasca experience or an experience with mushrooms. There can be a real intensity to it. It can be strong. It can be strong and punchy. And I feel like it's really, really, really important, this integration piece. I feel like it can be counterproductive to go and do really punchy, strong experiences and then go back and not integrate them, because of the pace of life or because you don't know how to or because you don't have a community around you. And then what's happened is that you've been living in your normal life and then you've gone and had this wildly transcendent experience. And then you go back to that previous life and actually the dissonance between the two can actually be traumatic. And it can create a distance between you and your wife or you and your kids, or you're confused in your role and your identities. And it can actually produce, I think that there's a certain type of existential depression that can actually arise through the lack of embodiment and integration of powerful experiences. And there's more and more people going to drink medicine these days. These plants are really coming out and saying, hey, we got something to show you guys. And I feel like the integration has got to evolve and develop in lockstep with that, and I feel like what you're saying is true. It's not, when I read books about psychedelic integration, it's like, they talk about the journaling and the creating space to be in nature and all of these wonderful practices. But this community aspect of dialoguing and mirroring and reflecting and being witnessed and heard, and I feel like this is really, really the sort of highest and deepest levels of integration. This is where we really help each other grow. This is how we help walk each other home. This is communion. This is belonging.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hitting all the way back down to the foundations. When you hit community, you're hitting the level at where we actually generate systems, where we create the ways that we do things. If it doesn't hit to community, it hasn't landed. It hasn't actually landed. So until it lands, it's not integrated. If people are too solo with that stuff, they just get absorbed back into the old system that is not resonating with them. And that's what you're saying. It's create a bit of a trauma sense of like, I've tuned into something, but I'm not able to bring it to ground. Where's the community supporting to bring this to ground? And then, of course, like the community that you're opening up with, it's like there's encouragement and support further to that to create together and however that can look. businesses and collaborations can all, and relationships, of course, can all birth out of this community, right? And everyone intrinsically knows that that's how it works. There happens to be, we have a community, we have a small community of friends who are very much on this vibration where we can speak to each other, and we've been so blessed to have this. And I just feel like this that we're offering is an extension of the gift that we've been offered already in coming together with such synchronicity, somehow finding each other across the globe and staying in connection with each other without even having to be in each other's physical presence for months, if not years even. It doesn't make a difference. So I'm so grateful for you to walk this with such sincerity and such grounded humor. And yeah, there's something so refreshing about this new chapter of leadership in the spiritual space, where it's so real and relatable, and you're just going to be such a support to people right now who are disillusioned by what's happening. The mental instability on the planet is hanging on by a thread, as information and technology are only really just making more challenging that sense of self. They're all contradicting the identity, right? And so everybody's like maybe starting to ask the question, and this is amazing, Jiro, this is amazing that for most human beings, they go through their entire life without truly considering the question, who am I? This consciousness, the way things are moving, the who am I question is only becoming greater and greater, isn't it? And more natural. And where do you land with that? The plant medicines, of course, some people are drawn to plant medicine, and Jiro's been walking with plant medicine as a strong medicine of awakening the heart, of just realizing what's beyond this very narrow vision, right? This very narrow perspective. It's like, wait a second, it kind of takes you beyond yourself really quickly. And of course, as you recognize now, integration and community is a really big part of actualizing all of that.
What's coming through, I just wanted to share one maybe closing kind of nugget for anyone listening. And maybe this is for someone who's in what you might call a dark night of the soul, or maybe it's a midlife crisis, or maybe you're in depression. What I've gone through has given me a very clear understanding of this, so I want to speak to it. When we give up our identities and when we let them all go, when we let go the roles and the things that we like and the things that we don't like, and all of our judgments and all of the things that make this personality, lo and behold, we don't actually become this kind of like lettuce, this inert kind of like blob with no preferences and no life force. Quite the opposite happens. There's actually an innate playfulness and joyfulness that is our hearts or our spirits or our true selves. And there's an aliveness and there's a freedom. It is the essence of freedom. And it's so playful and joyful, and it's kind of like it's so intelligent as well, right? And I just wanted to speak to that, to feed that flicker of hope and trust, because sometimes the hope can just be hanging by a frail thread and the trust gets challenged. And you're like, can I really give this up? Can I really let that go? And it's like, yes, letting that go is the pathway to freedom, to true freedom, to just being that which you truly are, which is beyond anything that I could possibly describe in words right now.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. Actually, that's definitely one of the gatekeepers to all of this, is the presumption of who you will be once something is let go of. And the message is, it will be opposite to what your mind tells you. It will be opposite. If it says you'll be depressed, it'll be opposite. If it says you're directionless, it'll be opposite. If it says you won't know who you are, or you'll be a homeless wreck or whatever, it'll be opposite, 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 opposite. It actually gives you the answer because it's telling you what's opposite.
Totally. Like the mind is like a very faithful navigational device. You just go the opposite way.
Well, thank you so much, Jiro, for your coming on and having this radically honest conversation about your fairly recent journey, and for stepping up again in courage and service to humanity in this time of waking up, and being cheeky and humorous along the way.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you got value out of this, please share it so that other people can benefit also. For more information about self-intelligence, including joining my next Wake Up experience, or detailed information about my 12-week self-intelligence course, go to selfintelligence.com.